What if the man who measured success by RevPAR and quarterly shareholder votes discovered that the only truth capable of silencing his empire of numbers was a little girl pretending to eat from empty plates in a forgotten corner of Seattle? If stories of redemption, justice, and unexpected family touch your heart, please like and subscribe so you can stay with us until the very last chapter of this journey. The November sky pressed low over Seattle, clouds smudging the horizon like damp charcoal. From the 69th floor of Columbia Center, Oliver Hayes closed his leather binder with a snap. Around the conference table, the aftertaste of battle lingered, slides full of occupancy forecasts, graphs of ADR compression, and arguments about whether slashing OPEX another 2% would calm restless shareholders. Patrick Sloan, Harbor Light's CFO, had dominated the room with polished charts. Labor flexibility is the only way to protect EBITDA margins, he'd said. Contractors, not legacy staff. Loyalty is a luxury we can't afford. Oliver had nodded in ritual agreement, but as the room emptied, he felt the weight of something unspoken pressing against his chest. The numbers lined up neatly on the page, yet they carried the sterility of an autopsy. Profit, but no pulse. He loosened his tie, dismissed his driver, and decided to walk down through Pioneer Square, where the drizzle could cool his thoughts better than any glass of scotch. Occidental Park was nearly empty at twilight. The chess tables glistened with rain, their boards abandoned. Golden ginkgo leaves carpeted the bricks, slick beneath his shoes. A guitarist under a canopy strummed a melancholic tune, the notes scattering into the mist. Then Oliver noticed her. A child sat on a faded blanket near the totem poles, maybe 7 years old. Blonde hair tangled, jacket too thin, her knees drawn close for warmth. Around her lay 4 plastic plates, clean but empty, arranged carefully in a circle as though invisible guests had been invited. She lifted a spoon to her mouth and pretended to chew. Oliver slowed. In 39 years of chasing market share, he had learned to read every signal of demand. But this scene felt like a signal from a different ledger, one no spreadsheet had ever tracked. He approached cautiously. "Hey there, what are you doing out here?" The girl looked up, blue eyes startling against the gray air. "My mom says if I pretend I'm eating, it helps the hunger go away." The words struck sharper than any analyst's downgrade. From beneath the blanket, she pulled a folded scrap of paper and held it out with solemn dignity. Oliver crouched, accepting it with hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts without trembling. The pencil marks were uneven but clear. "Sir, my name is Mia. I'm tired of pretending." The note quivered in his grip. He blinked hard, the drizzle blurring letters that already blurred his certainty. Nearby, a food truck on Yesler Way sent out the warm smell of clam chowder. Without hesitation, Oliver bought a bread bowl of chowder and a cup of hot chocolate. Returning, he lowered himself onto the wet bricks beside her, cross-legged in a suit that cost more than most families' rent. "Real food tastes better than pretending," he said gently, sliding the bowl toward her. Mia hesitated, then dipped her spoon into the steam. She ate quickly but with surprising care, as though every bite deserved ceremony. Oliver stayed quiet, letting the drizzle dot his shoulders. For once he had no charts, no forecasts, no strategy, only presence. When she finished, Mia looked at him with shy gratitude. "You're not scared to sit here? Most people walk fast like we don't exist." Oliver searched for words. "Sometimes people get too busy looking at numbers to see people." She tilted her head. "Numbers like homework?" He smiled faintly. "Something like that." Her honesty disarmed him. For years, his life had been a symphony of metrics, ADR upticks, RevPAR growth, P&L variances. But none of those numbers carried the force of one child's empty plates. The park lights flickered on. Oliver's phone buzzed with Sloane's follow-up. Need confirmation on revised labor schedules. He turned the screen face down. Tonight, projections could wait. He asked softly, "Where's your mom, Mia?" "At the car," she whispered. "We sleep there." Behind the gas station by the big road. Oliver pictured the roar of I-5 traffic, the harsh fluorescence of a station near Dearborn Street, and a child curled in the back seat. A hotel magnate worth hundreds of millions was listening to a girl with no bed beyond vinyl upholstery. Her small hand tugged his sleeve. "I just don't want to pretend anymore." He swallowed hard. For the first time in years, he felt powerless without a spreadsheet, without leverage, without his title. But he knew one thing. He could not walk away. Later that night, when Oliver returned to his penthouse on First Hill, the city glowed beneath him. Cranes swinging, ferries gliding, neon bleeding across wet streets. None of it silenced the paper he carried in his pocket. 5 words in shaky pencil echoed louder than any quarterly report. "I'm tired of pretending." And somewhere between the ledgers of occupancy rates and the quiet hunger of Occidental Park, Oliver Hayes realized his empire of numbers had just been outmatched by a single truth. Night gathered early along Dearborn Street, a soft dark stitched with the constant thread of freeway noise. Oliver drove with his hazards of conscience blinking louder than the turn signals, following Mia's directions, small and certain gestures from the passenger seat as if she were guiding him through her own map of invisibility. "Here," she said, pointing past the ramp. Behind a gas station's harsh white lights sat a dented sedan, its paint oxidized to a dull chalk. The windows were fogged. Inside, a woman slept in the driver's seat with her arms folded tight against the cold. Mia tapped the glass. "Mama!" Lauren Brooks startled awake, eyes sharpening from fatigue into alertness. She saw the man in the tailored coat and straightened, placing herself instinctively between him and her child. "Mia, what did I tell you about talking to strangers?" Her voice was hoarse but steady. "He brought real food," Mia said, unable to hide the pride in the word real. "I'm Oliver," he offered, palms open. "I saw her in Occidental Park. She needed a meal. I thought you both might need more than one." Lauren's gaze assessed him with the precision of someone who has worked rooms others only sleep in. Damp blankets in the back seat. A plastic grocery sack with 2 apples and a packet of crackers. 3 parking warnings tucked beneath the sun visor. Survival, labeled and stacked. "We're fine," she said. Mia swayed a little, catching herself on the door. Oliver noticed the pallor, the dullness at her lips, the way she blinked harder to focus. Not drama, Dauda. He knew numbers. Now he recognized symptoms. Low intake, mild hypoglycemia, fatigue that no amount of pretending could soften. "There's a hospital close," he said. "Harborview Medical Center, public. They won't turn you away. Let me take you." Lauren held his stare, weighing pride against risk. "We can't pay." "You might not have to. They have social workers. They'll connect you with programs. Tonight, let them check Mia. That's all." Silence hung, taut as fishing line. Then Lauren unlocked the passenger door. "Mia rides in front with me." Oliver nodded. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a boundary. Harborview's emergency department hummed with ordinary catastrophe. Triage monitors pulsing green, nurses moving with a choreography born of purpose. A pediatric bay opened. The nurse warmed a blood pressure cuff in her hands before wrapping it around Mia's arm. The resident, calm, curious eyes, asked simple questions and listened harder than most adults do. "How often do you feel dizzy?" he asked. Mia glanced at her mother. "Answer him, baby," Lauren whispered. "Sometimes," she said. "When I haven't had breakfast." The resident ordered a finger-stick glucose, basic labs, hydration, and a small snack. Nothing performative, everything necessary. Numbers returned. Gently low, not critical, fixable, if food became a rhythm instead of a wish. He turned to Lauren. We'll start iron and multivitamins, and I'll get our social worker. There are programs. Tonight, you both rest a while. Lauren's shoulders dropped a fraction. It was not relief. It was an exhale she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Oliver stood slightly back, resisting the urge to overstep. He wasn't the CEO here. He was an extra set of steady eyes while a mother navigated a system built like a maze. The social worker arrived, ponytail damp from the weather, clipboard crisp. She spoke plainly, not as policy but as path. Ms. Brooks, for school. The McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act means your daughter can enroll immediately, even without proof of residence. Transportation support is possible. For benefits, Washington DSHS can help with basic food, Apple Health, and an emergency housing wait list. I'll give you intake contacts and submit referrals tonight. Lauren nodded once. No tears, no display. A professional receiving information she would file in memory and pull out at the right counter tomorrow. Oliver listened, memorizing names like Lifelines, McKinney-Vento, DSHS, Apple Health. Terms he'd skimmed past in glossy ESG decks now had the density of shelter. Mia, meanwhile, discovered the vending machine's logic, how dollars became raisins, and returned to the bed with the seriousness of a provider. For you, Mama, she said, placing the box in Lauren's hand. The smallest acts have the cleanest edges. Oliver felt something unclench in his chest. When labs were complete and discharge instructions printed, the nurse packed a few meal vouchers into a discreet envelope. These help in a pinch, she said, looking at Lauren as if they were co-workers on a long shift. Oliver offered to bring the car around. We'll take you back. Lauren surprised him. Could you drive past the shelter list on your way? They post openings around midnight. He swallowed. Of course she knew the city by its after-hours circuitry. Of course. Mia slipped her hand into his without looking, the way children do when instinct outruns permission. He matched his stride to hers, careful to make the hospital corridor feel like a hallway rather than a gauntlet. Outside, the air had turned colder, the sky a sheet of tin. The city smelled like rain and diesel, and something faintly sweet from a bakery closing for the night. Seattle carried 1,000 stories each evening. Tonight it carried one he could no longer set down. They drove first to a community notice board. Lauren stepped out, scanned the paper strips, and tore off 2 numbers with practiced economy. Back in the car, her voice softened, almost to herself. Morning lines start before dawn. We can try again tomorrow, Oliver said. We will, she replied, not looking at him. It wasn't defiance. It was a promise to her child, spoken sideways so the world couldn't argue. Near the Dearborn ramp, the gas station glared into the dark. Oliver parked where the shadows thinned. He didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't offer speeches. Dignity is a quiet thing. Tonight, he would not drown it. Lauren shifted in her seat, fingers firm on the door handle. I worked for Harbor Light, she said, as if admitting a strange allergy. Alaskan Way property, 6 years. Exceeds expectations on every review. Then a code I'd never heard of ended it. RF 19. Oliver's throat tightened. He stopped himself. Apologies without remedy are melodrama. That shouldn't have happened, he said instead, each word measured. She studied him, searching for an angle. You talk like someone who's read the manual. I've read a lot of manuals, he said, letting the truth skim but not show its full face. Some of them need rewriting. A long beat. She nodded once. If you want to help, don't make this about us. Fix the thing that broke us. He absorbed it like instruction, because it was. Mia unbuckled, leaning forward with the solemnity of a negotiator. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked. "If you want me to," Oliver said. She considered, then decided, yes, because now the pretend plates are gone. He smiled, small, honest. "Then I'll see you tomorrow." Lauren drew the blanket from the back and tucked it around her daughter. Before closing the door, she looked at Oliver without armor for the first time. "Thank you for tonight," she said. It wasn't surrender. It was the exact size of gratitude that fits into a hard day without cracking it. He stepped back as she shut the door, the sedan returning to its shape of temporary home. Overhead, trucks thundered along I-5 like distant weather. Oliver lingered until the cold insisted, then turned toward his own car carrying the names Harborview, McKinney-Vento, DSHS, like keys on a ring. On First Hill, the skyline blinked its indifferent constellations. Inside his penthouse, the silence was curated and useless. He set his phone on the counter and wrote, not in a leather notebook, but on the back of his discharge visitor badge, a list he could not outsource. Call counsel. Map legal path to recall. Audit RIF 19 against CBA and union language. Design rehiring bridge. Transparent probation. Child care support. Transit stipends. Keep Mia fed tomorrow. Quietly. He pinned the badge to the fridge like a child's drawing and laughed at himself without contempt. Humility, he realized, is also a kind of architecture. You build it by admitting what should have been obvious. Down on Dearborn, a mother and daughter slept in a car that should have been a room. Up on First Hill, a man with every room a city offers finally understood a different math. The distance between shelter and exposure is measured in policies, not platitudes. He turned off the kitchen light and for once left the strategic deck unopened. In the morning he would return, not with speeches, but with steps. The next morning, Seattle shook itself awake under a gauzy sky. Ferries traced their usual paths across Elliott Bay, while cranes creaked above Alaskan Way, lifting steel for hotels Oliver himself had commissioned. From his office on the upper floors of Columbia Center, he looked out at the waterfront glass towers that bore Harbor Light's name. To shareholders, those buildings were testaments of resilience. To him, this morning, they felt like monuments hiding unspoken debts. Oliver logged into the company's HRRS, an archive he had rarely touched directly. Executives weren't expected to scroll through personnel files. That was the domain of directors and assistants. But today, he searched by instinct. Brooks, Lauren. The screen flickered, then displayed her record. Position? Room attendant, Harbor Light Waterfront Hotel. Start date, 2013. Termination date, June 2020. Under performance reviews, consistent, professional language, a neat history of service. One line caught him. Exceeds expectations. It appeared year after year, entered by supervisors who had known her only by badge number and diligence. The phrase was tidy, corporate, yet suddenly it carried weight. She had excelled. And still, when a global pandemic shuttered travel, she was discarded by a code in a system. Oliver studied the termination field. RF-19. Reduction in force. A generic tag with brutal precision. The system didn't explain the sleepless nights in a car, the empty plates, the child pretending dinner into existence. It just listed reason code. His chest tightened. He opened the attached severance file. The package had been standard. 8 weeks' pay, no recall rights. A footnote referenced policy revision, 2020 labor strategy. Oliver remembered the meeting. The CFO, Patrick Sloan, had argued that bringing back long-tenured staff would anchor the cost structure, locking in benefits and seniority. His model favored short-term contracts, younger workers without dependents, maximum flexibility. The board had approved. Oliver had signed. At the time, it had sounded like survival. Streamline labor, optimize schedules, shave OPEX. But now, the numbers had faces. Mia's pale lips, Lauren's measured pride. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. In the hush of his corner office, surrounded by walnut paneling and steel awards, Oliver felt the hollow click of consequences he could no longer unhear. The door opened without a knock. Patrick Sloan stepped in, crisp suit, tablet in hand. "Morning. We need your sign-off on the Q4 forecast adjustments. Labor costs still trending down exactly as modeled." Oliver swiveled the screen toward him. "Do you remember this name?" He pointed at Lauren's file. Sloan scanned briefly, expression unreadable. "Thousands like her. Solid worker, but we can't carry everyone. The pandemic forced hard calls. We built leaner. It's working. Investors are pleased." "She worked 6 years at the waterfront," Oliver pressed. "Never missed a review, consistently exceeded performance standards, and she was released with no recall rights." "That was the point," Sloan replied smoothly. "We eliminated recall. Otherwise, we'd be trapped rehiring legacy staff with baggage, childcare conflicts, inflexible shifts. We need adaptable labor pools. No dependence, no complications. The model is clean." Oliver's voice sharpened. "Clean for who? Our balance sheet? Or for the people pretending to eat off plastic plates?" The CFO frowned, unsettled by the edge in his tone. "Oliver, empathy doesn't protect margins. Shareholders expect RevPAR growth, not social experiments." Oliver closed the file with a decisive click. What if both could coexist? What if loyalty, stability, and community were not costs but assets? You build brand preference, reduce turnover, increase productivity. Sloan gave a thin smile. "Try selling that to analysts. Wall Street doesn't price compassion." Oliver stood, taller than his executive. Maybe it should, and maybe it will. For a moment, silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the hum of the office HVAC. Sloan finally turned, smoothing his tie. "If you want to revisit policy, bring it to the executive committee. But know the numbers. Until then, I'll run the company by math, not sentiment." He left, the door shutting softly but with the finality of a gavel. Oliver stared again at the file on the screen. Lauren had given 6 years of invisible excellence to Harbor Light. Her reward was a code and an empty promise. He printed the record, folding the paper once, sliding it into his leather folio. Not as evidence yet, but as a reminder. This was not about one woman, though her story had pierced him. This was about a system that had built hotels higher by grinding lives flatter. Looking out the window at Alaskan Way, Oliver saw the Harbor Light Waterfront Hotel glimmer in the gray. Inside, guests slept on feather duvets, concierge phones rang with dinner reservations, and staff bustled with practiced smiles. Somewhere in the memory of that building lingered Lauren Brooks, pressing linens, polishing brass, meeting standards no guest ever thought to measure. And now, she was raising a daughter in the backseat of a car, while executives like him congratulated themselves on efficient margins. For the first time in years, Oliver felt the stir of something more powerful than strategy. Anger, not at a competitor, but at his own signature inked on a policy that had severed dignity from loyalty. He opened a fresh page in his folio and wrote, in block letters, "Recall, back pay, housing bridge." Beneath it, smaller, "Rewrite the manual." That night, he left the office later than usual. Outside, Pioneer Square glowed with string lights over wet cobblestones. Street musicians played for coins, their notes rising into the damp air. Oliver paused, listening longer than he intended. On the walk back to his car, he felt the folded file heavy in his coat pocket, a weight more potent than any quarterly report. Tomorrow, he knew, Sloan would marshal spreadsheets, council would cite compliance codes, and board members would mutter about fiduciary duty. But tonight, Oliver carried something stronger. The conviction that Harbor Light's future could no longer be measured only in margins. It would be measured in whether a little girl ever again had to set out empty plates to quiet her hunger. Morning thinned the clouds over Seattle, drawing pale light across the conference table where Harbor Light's executive committee assembled. Oliver had slept badly. The corners of his folio were frayed from being opened and closed through the night. Inside sat a single personnel printout, Lauren's, and a one-page draft titled Recall First Framework. Patrick Sloan entered with the bright chill of a man who trusted his spreadsheets more than weather. General Counsel Rebecca Price came behind him, precise, unhurried, the quiet metronome of risk. "Let's begin," Oliver said. The screens woke. A single slide. Stark and plain. Probationary rehire, 30 days, with transparent metrics. Back pay eligibility where recall language was breached. Temporary corporate housing for employees in crisis. Caregiver shift design pilot with stipend union consultation and regulatory audit baked into rollout. He remained standing. "We laid people off by code. We will bring them back with a system, not one-off gestures. Policy." Patrick barely looked at the slide. "And the price tag?" "Lower than the cost of reputational drift," Oliver said. "We're losing trust with the very workforce that animates our brand." Rebecca folded her hands. "Before price, guardrails. If we do this, we'll align it once, cleanly, with employment laws, our CBA, and our federal obligations. No special deals, no ad hoc exceptions. A single neutral process, documented and auditable. If it can't be defended in writing, it doesn't go in." That was the entire legal paragraph, clear, contained. No flurry of acronyms to choke the room. Patrick tapped his tablet. "Then here is the math, once. Corporate housing slots, stipends, back pay reserves, and additional hours for training will lift operating expense this year and trim margin. You can call it purpose, I call it dilution." "Logged," Oliver answered. "Now let's talk returns that don't fit on this quarter's line." He clicked to the next slide. Guest satisfaction curves, turnover costs, time to competency charts for new contractors versus returning staff. "We're spending millions training churn. We bleed brand knowledge every time we cycle a room attendant who knows our standards better than any manual. People like Lauren save guests from friction before it exists. That doesn't show up as a credit, but it shows up in loyalty, reviews, RevPAR." Patrick exhaled through his nose. "You're romanticizing housekeeping." "I'm recognizing productivity," Oliver said, even, "and values. We called ourselves a family brand, then abandoned actual families. We fix that, or we keep the hypocrisy tax." Rebecca glanced between them. "If you want a path that survives scrutiny, we also need something simple enough to execute. Not a cathedral of forms, a clean funnel." "Then we keep it to 3 gates," Oliver replied, flipping pages on his draft. "Gate 1, objective recall eligibility. Gate 2, 30-day re-entry with scored metrics, attendance, quality checks, guest incident rate. Gate 3, conversion at prior seniority if they pass. Housing and stipend access only during Gate 2, capped and auditable." "Who decides pass-fail?" Rebecca asked. "A supervisor panel with union oversight," Oliver said. "Tie it to the contract's language so it's not personal." Patrick leaned back, studying Oliver like a rival. "You're changing who we are." "I'm restoring who we said we were," Oliver answered. Silence grazed the table's edge. The city beyond Columbia Center looked cold and clean, a skyline of invoices and hopes. Oliver felt every eye, every quiet calculation. He placed Lauren's file on the polished wood. "This name represents 6 years of exceptional service," he said without repeating the phrase that haunted him. She was cut by RIF 19 and never invited back. Her daughter sleeps in a car by the freeway. She is not a symbol for pity. She's evidence of how our system behaves when no one is watching. Rebecca looked at the file, her tone more human than yesterday. "You're proposing we start with her." "I'm proposing we start with the rule," Oliver said, "and she passes through it first." Patrick rolled his shoulders. "And if she can't work nights, if childcare pinches, schedules will buckle." "Then our pilot for caregiver shifts proves its worth," Oliver said. "We don't pretend families don't exist. We schedule like they do and capture talent others waste." He let the room breathe. Then he shut the projector off. No hymn, no heroics. "We pride ourselves on precision. Apply it to people, not just to price." The meeting recessed. The hall smelled faintly of coffee and printer heat. Oliver lingered by the windows while the city hardened into mid-morning. Rebecca joined him. "You kept it tight," she said. "Good. Give me your draft. I'll turn it into a skeleton that can stand up in a storm." He handed over the folio. "I need the storm." "You'll get it," she said, almost smiling. "Start with a pilot at Waterfront. Build a paper trail we'd be proud to hand a regulator. Keep the decisioning criteria dull on purpose. Dull protects us." He nodded. "And Lauren?" "Offer made through the framework," Rebecca said. "Not through you. Distance between your heart and HR is our best defense." Oliver absorbed it, grateful. She was telling him how to care and not contaminate the process. That was what a real shield did. Not block change, shape it. Patrick appeared at the corridor's end as if summoned by dissent. "Investors will have questions this afternoon," he said. "If you characterize this as moral repair, they'll smell weakness." "Then we characterize it as risk management and capability retention," Oliver said, steady. "It happens to be moral, which is a feature, not a bug." Patrick's mouth twitched. "You used to talk like me." "I used to believe the numbers were the whole story," Oliver replied. "I was wrong." They held each other's gaze, two architects of the same tower looking from different blueprints. Patrick left without another word. In the elevator down to HR, Oliver watched his reflection hover between floors. He stopped on level 21, where the cubicles were tidy and quiet, winter coats on chairbacks like small sleeping animals. A young HR manager stood when she saw him. "Mr. Hayes?" "I'm here to request 2 things," he said. "First, a list of employees separated under RIF 19 in violation of recall language. That phrase won't be in the file, you'll see it by absence. Second, a neutral scoring rubric for 30-day re-entry, co-drafted with the union." Her eyes widened, not with fear but relief. "Yes, sir." "And," he added, "I don't want my name on any individual decision. Build the process so it doesn't need me." She smiled. "That part will be easy." On his way out, Oliver paused at a wall of framed service pins. 5 years, 10, 15. He imagined those pins in drawers around the city, next to old name badges and eviction notices. He pictured a little girl arranging empty plates and deciding, with ceremony, that hunger could be postponed by pretending. He promised himself the new policy would not pretend. By late afternoon, Rebecca's markup returned. Clean verbs, tight clauses, a pipeline any auditor could trace with a pen. Oliver read it once, twice, feeling the document's weight, not only legal, ethical. He signed to advance it to the executive committee for a formal vote, then picked up his phone, hesitated, and set it down. He would not call Lauren, not yet. He'd let the system he was responsible for finally do its work. Instead, he texted one person, the Waterfront GM. "Tomorrow, prepare for a pilot re-entry panel. Quietly loop in Local 8. We start with a worker named Lauren Brooks. Treat this like you were building a new wing of the hotel. The reply came fast. Understood. Oliver stood at the window until the harbor lifted a thin band of silver. The city felt newly legible, like a map whose legend he'd finally learned to read. The shield he'd feared, compliance, wasn't a wall today. It was a scaffold. If he climbed carefully, it could hold the weight of repair. He closed the folio, leaving Lauren's paper on top, and turned off the light. Tomorrow, the hotel would open doors it once closed. Pike Place Market was winding down, its neon humming against the dusk. The air smelled of brine, roasted nuts, and damp wood. Oliver carried a tray of clam chowder in sourdough bowls, balancing it as though it were treasure. Lauren and Mia walked beside him, cautious, unsure whether to accept this evening as kindness or intrusion. They found a spot near a bench beneath the arcade awning where the crowd had thinned and only the murmur of buskers floated in. Mia's eyes widened as Oliver handed her the bread bowl. Steam rose, curling into the chilly air. She bent forward, spoon in hand, and tasted as if afraid it might vanish. "Good?" Oliver asked softly. Mia nodded, her cheeks glowing. "Better than pretending." Lauren said little, eating mechanically, her back still taut with suspicion. For a few minutes, silence carried them. Oliver thought, perhaps foolishly, that the evening might hold, that maybe his disguise as a regional manager could last long enough to earn a fragment of trust before the truth intruded. But trust has a way of forcing its own hour. When Oliver pulled out his wallet to pay the vendor, a small leather card holder slipped free. Gold lettering glinted in the neon light. Harbor Light Hotels, CEO Access. Lauren saw it instantly. Her fork froze. "You," she said, her voice raw. "You're not some manager. You're him." Oliver froze, heart hammering. Mia blinked between them, sensing the fracture. Lauren stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wet brick. "All this," she gestured to the chowder, the easy talk, "was a game? The man who signed the papers that shoved me out of Harbor Light pretended to be a stranger? Just to what? Watch me squirm? Feed your conscience?" Oliver rose too, hands open. "No, I didn't lie to play with you. I didn't tell you because I was afraid. Afraid you'd see only the title, not the man trying to change." Her laugh was sharp, bitter. "The man trying to change? You sat in the chair while Patrick Sloan stripped my recall rights. You let him call mothers like me a liability. And now you want me to clap because you bought soup?" Mia tugged at her mother's sleeve, whispering, "Mama, he helped." But Lauren's voice only tightened. "He helped because he could. That's not kindness, Mia. That's power." The words landed like iron. Oliver wanted to protest, to explain about the recall-first policy, about the boardroom fights already underway. But promises half-born would sound like manipulation now, so he said the one truth he could. "You're right. You don't need pity. You need a chance, real opportunity, not favors, and I intend to build that, even if you never believe me." Lauren's eyes glistened with a fury deeper than tears. "Then prove it. Prove it to the hundreds of Laurens who will never get to sit here. Prove it in the system, not in a market stall." With that, she gathered Mia's hand and walked away into the mist, her silhouette dissolving among neon and drizzle. Oliver remained, the chowder cooling untouched before him. The mask had fallen, and with it, any illusion of easy reconciliation. Later that night, Oliver sat at his First Hill penthouse window, the city spread in rain-streaked lights below. The words replayed like a verdict, not kindness, power. He thought of his father, a hotel clerk who had once saved tips in a coffee tin, dreaming of a son who would build something lasting. He had built it, but built it on ledgers that cut mothers loose, on quarterly slides Sloan celebrated. And now, a little girl had shown him the emptiness of his banquet tables. Oliver set down his glass untouched. He pulled the recall first draft closer, scribbling in the margin. Not favors, opportunity. And a single phrase underlined twice. It would not win back Lauren tonight, but it could build a world where her words were not prophecy. The next morning, his phone buzzed with news alerts. The viral video of Mia's dream house drawing had surfaced on local stations, linked to her mother's termination at Harbor Light. Comment sections swelled with outrage. A hotel chain boasting ESG awards lets a child starve? Boycott Harbor Light until they fix this. The board would feel the heat soon enough. Sloan would weaponize it, call it brand damage. But Oliver knew the truth. It was not damage. It was exposure. And it was the only chance he had left to prove to Lauren and to himself that he was more than a man with a title. Seattle's November sky pressed down in a single sheet of gray, rain sliding off umbrellas as reporters crowded the marble steps of City Hall. Their cameras whirred, microphones poised. For weeks, Harbor Light hotels had been the subject of whispers, but today those whispers would be read into the public record. Inside, the Labor Committee chamber buzzed with voices. Workers in faded uniforms, union leaders, council members, and journalists filling every seat. At the witness table sat Oliver Hayes, suit immaculate but shoulders tight, flanked by General Counsel Rebecca Price. To his other side, CFO Patrick Sloan lounged with his usual ease, as though hearings were a formality, not a reckoning. Councilmember Teresa Alvarez struck the gavel. The chatter fell still. This hearing addresses allegations that Harbor Light hotels violated recall rights guaranteed under the collective bargaining agreement with Unite Here. Local 8 during pandemic-related layoffs. We will hear testimony from both sides. The union representative, Marisol Vega, rose first. Her voice carried the power of picket lines and lived scars, and our contract promised recall rights. Yet Harbor Light created RIF 19, a code that quietly stripped those rights. The result? Single mothers, older workers, people with families, erased from payrolls. We have evidence this was not chance. It was policy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She motioned to the side, and a few former employees stepped forward. One described unanswered calls to HR, another the humiliation of being replaced by short-term contractors. Then Lauren Brooks took the stand. Her presence drew a hush. She adjusted the microphone with trembling fingers, then spoke with clear, measured resolve. My name is Lauren Brooks. I worked 6 years at Harbor Light Waterfront. My reviews were excellent. Then one day, I was gone. No recall, no explanation. My daughter and I now live in a car by I-5. All because someone decided mothers like me were too expensive. The silence that followed was heavier than the rain outside. Councilmember Alvarez nodded gravely, then turned to the company's side. Mr. Sloan, Mr. Hayes, your response? Patrick rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket. His tone was practiced, almost casual. Council members, RIF 19 was a neutral policy. It applied evenly, designed to keep Harbor Light solvent during an unprecedented crisis. Without it, thousands more would have lost jobs permanently. This is not discrimination, it's survival. He spread his hands, confident. Every decision aligned with our duty to shareholders and guests. That's the reality of hospitality economics. The council murmured, some nodding, others frowning. Patrick began to sit, but Councilmember Alvarez raised a sheet of paper handed to her by an aide. Then explain this. The overhead projector flickered to life, revealing an internal email. The words glowed across the chamber. Flag employees with dependents as high-cost risk. Priority rehiring should exclude single parents where possible. Families compromise scheduling flexibility and increase benefit premiums. Optimize recall to unmarried, no-dependent staff. The reaction was instant. Gasps, shouts. Reporters scrambled to capture the slide. Workers in the back hissed, some raising fists. Patrick's face drained of color. That email, taken out of context. But the council members weren't listening, nor was the crowd. The words spoke for themselves, cold as a balance sheet. Lauren, seated again, whispered just loud enough for those near her to hear. No context makes that right. Oliver felt his pulse hammering. He could remain silent, let counsel argue procedure. That was the safe route. But safety was cowardice now. He rose slowly, the microphones catching his voice. My name is Oliver Hayes. I am CEO of Harbor Light Hotels. What you see on that screen is indefensible. It happened under my leadership, and I take responsibility. Patrick whipped toward him, furious. Oliver! But Oliver continued, voice steady. Yes, the pandemic was unprecedented. Yes, survival mattered. But survival bought at the cost of discarding families is not survival. It's betrayal. I cannot undo what was done, but I can change what comes next. He turned toward the council. We are drafting a recall-first policy in collaboration with the union. Every laid-off worker will have a transparent path back, audited for compliance. We will establish a housing bridge fund for employees in crisis. Harbor Light will not merely meet contracts, it will live up to its humanity. The chamber erupted. Applause from the union side, skeptical murmurs from others, the click of 100 keyboards. Patrick slammed a folder shut, muttering about brand suicide. Rebecca glanced at Oliver, her expression unreadable, but there was the faintest flicker of approval. Councilmember Alvarez struck the gavel again. Mr. Hayes, this committee expects a written policy within 30 days with union review. If Harbor Light fails, we will refer the matter to the Office of Labor Standards for enforcement. Oliver nodded. You'll have it. The gavel echoed. Adjournment announced. As people filed out, Lauren passed Oliver without a word, Mia clutching her hand. She did not thank him. She did not even meet his eyes. And that, Oliver knew, was fair. Trust would not come from speeches, only from action. Outside, the storm pressed against the tall windows of City Hall. Patrick stormed into a waiting car, already on the phone, his voice rising. Rebecca lingered at Oliver's side, her tone measured. You just declared war on your own CFO. You'd better be ready. Oliver pulled his coat tighter, gaze steady. Not war. Alignment. With the people who built these hotels. If Sloan wants a fight, he'll get one. And as he stepped into the rain-soaked night, Oliver realized the empire of numbers had finally been dragged into the light. And there was no turning back. The rain had eased into a mist the morning Oliver Hayes arrived at Bailey Gatzert Elementary, a red brick building standing firm against the gray Seattle sky. He had expected the walk through its double doors to feel routine, like the ceremonial visits he'd made to schools during charity photo ops. But today, he wasn't there for a ribbon cutting. He was there for Mia Brooks. The Northwest Justice Project attorney had explained it clearly. Under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, children without stable housing have the right to immediate enrollment in public schools, no matter their address or paperwork. Transportation, meals, supplies, they're guaranteed. Oliver had absorbed the information like oxygen. He thought of how his hotels measured occupancy percentages while children measured nights in cars. For the first time, the law felt not like an abstract acronym, but like a lifeline. Lauren and Mia arrived a few minutes later, guided by a social worker. Lauren's posture was taut, wary of the stares from other parents. But Mia's steps quickened as they crossed the threshold, her eyes drawn to the colorful posters inside. Letters of the alphabet painted in bright blocks, student art taped along the hallway. The principal, a woman named Denise Porter, greeted them warmly. "Welcome, Mia. We're glad you're here." Her tone was firm, like she was addressing not just a child, but a promise. The enrollment process was brisk. Signatures, verification under McKinney-Vento, transportation vouchers arranged for pickup and drop-off. Lauren's hand trembled as she signed the forms. For so long, every system had told her no. Today, for the first time, it said yes. Mia received a backpack filled with supplies, pencils, crayons, a lunch card, even a small notebook with a bright blue cover. She held it like treasure, pressing it to her chest. "Do I really get to stay?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes," the principal said. "From today on, this is your school." Oliver stood off to the side, careful not to intrude. He felt a tightness in his chest, watching the weight lift from Mia's small shoulders. He knew it wasn't trust yet, not from Lauren, not from Mia, but it was a beginning. That afternoon, Oliver received a link from one of his staff. "You should see this," the message read. It was a short video filmed in Mia's new classroom. At the front, Mia held her blue notebook open to a crayon drawing. Her voice was soft but steady. "This is my dream," she told her classmates. "It's not just a house anymore. It's a library tree. The branches are books, and the leaves are my friends. When you sit under it, you never have to pretend. You can read and eat and laugh, all at the same time." The camera zoomed in on her drawing, a wide tree, its trunk strong, branches filled with open books that doubled as leaves. Underneath sat children with smiling faces, a lunch table beside them, and rays of sunlight breaking through. Her classmates clapped. The teacher placed a hand over her heart. By evening, the clip had gone viral. Headlines appeared across Seattle. "Formerly homeless girl inspires with library tree dream," and "Students drawing shines spotlight on Harbor Light's labor scandal." Oliver watched the video on his laptop, alone in his office, high above the city. The applause of strangers filled the room, but his focus stayed on Mia's small hand pointing at the tree she had imagined into existence. It struck him deeply. A child who once pretended to eat from empty plates had redefined abundance, not with mansions or riches, but with a tree of books and friends, something no quarterly report could measure. The next day, Oliver met with his communications team. They had already drafted responses to the viral coverage. "Mr. Hayes, we can spin this," one advisor insisted. "Emphasize Harbor Light's existing community initiatives. Highlight donations. Control the narrative." Oliver shook his head. "No spin, no press releases that smell like advertising. We'll fund the library she dreamed of, but anonymously. No logos, no banners, just books and computers for every student who needs them." The team exchanged uneasy glances. "Sir, if we don't brand it, we lose goodwill." "Then we lose it," Oliver cut in, his tone final. "This isn't about goodwill. It's about dignity." The order was clear. By week's end, a shipment of supplies arrived at Bailey Gatzert. Shelves of books, laptops for research, art kits, even a few beanbag chairs where children could read in comfort. Teachers wept quietly as they unpacked the boxes. Students squealed with delight, racing to claim the newest storybooks. And in the corner, Mia discovered a small plaque no bigger than a notebook. "For the dreamers, may your library trees always grow." She touched the plaque, smiling as if it were meant only for her. Outside the school gates, Lauren spoke quietly to Oliver. "You do realize, this doesn't erase what happened. My nights in that car don't vanish because of a tree of books. I know, Oliver said softly. This isn't about erasing. It's about planting something new. Lauren studied him, her expression unreadable. But her voice lacked the sharp edge it once carried. Mia loves this place already. For that, I'll say thank you. Just don't expect more. Not yet. I won't, Oliver promised. Mia ran up then, clutching her notebook. She held up her drawing again, the tree brighter this time with more colors added. Look, Mama. It's not just me now. My friends are here too. Lauren bent to kiss her daughter's forehead. Oliver watched the moment quietly, knowing that trust, like any tree, needed time to grow roots. That night, the video of Mia's classroom dream continued to spread, reaching not just Seattle, but beyond. Emails from investors began trickling into Oliver's inbox, some skeptical, some curious. Others surprisingly supportive. ESG risk, once an abstract term, was suddenly embodied in the voice of a 7-year-old girl. Oliver closed his laptop and looked out at the city lights flickering across the sound. For once, he didn't see percentages or forecasts. He saw branches reaching skyward, leaves shaped like books, roots anchored in the soil of a child's hope. And he knew, if Harbor Light was to survive, it would not be through cost savings or neutral policies. It would be through honoring the tree Mia had drawn, making it real not just for her, but for every worker and child whose lives his company touched. The old warehouse in Ballard had been stripped and polished into a temporary boardroom. Exposed beams hung overhead, industrial lights casting a harsh glow over long tables where directors, advisors, and analysts had gathered. Outside, rain swept against the windows in steady sheets, Seattle's weather underscoring the weight of the evening. Oliver Hayes took his seat at the head of the table, his notes stacked in a neat folder. He had rehearsed this moment 100 times in his mind, but tonight he would not speak as the calculating CEO who measured every syllable for market impact. Tonight, he would speak as a man convinced that the future of Harbor Light Hotels, and perhaps its very soul, rested on what he proposed. Rebecca Price, general counsel, sat to his right, composed as ever. Across the table, Patrick Sloan lounged with the confidence of a man who had survived every storm by turning numbers into weapons. The directors shifted in their seats, murmuring as the meeting began. Oliver stood, clearing his throat. Thank you for coming. Tonight we face a choice that goes beyond quarterly returns. Harbor Light cannot thrive if it abandons the people who built it. I'm presenting the Harbor Light ESG Impact Plan, policies that restore recall rights, provide a housing bridge fund, introduce caregiver-focused shift design, and establish a childcare stipend. This is not charity. This is strategy. He clicked the projector. Graphs and case studies filled the screen. Brands that had embraced ESG reforms and gained measurable RevPAR growth through brand loyalty. Guests no longer choose hotels by price alone. They choose by values. A company that betrays its workers will lose them, and the customers who care. A murmur rippled through the room. Some directors leaned forward. Others frowned, skeptical. Patrick rose deliberately, smoothing his tie. His voice carried the crispness of a man who had won countless debates on numbers alone. Colleagues, let's be clear. This plan inflates OPEX and trims our margins. Housing stipends, childcare, flexible shifts, these sound noble, but they undermine efficiency. Shareholders will see expenses rising, profits shrinking. Wall Street punishes sentiment. It rewards discipline. He tapped his tablet, projecting a red graph with downward arrows. Our EBITDA margin drops by 3 points under this plan. That's not conjecture, it's math. Do we want Harbor Light remembered as the company that sacrificed shareholder value to make activists cheer? Silence followed, heavy and charged. The board's eyes shifted back to Oliver. He did not flinch. Patrick is right about the math. But wrong about the meaning, because numbers don't tell the whole story. RevPAR isn't just about room rates, it's about reputation. Occupancy follows trust. Guests want to know they're staying at a hotel that treats people as assets, not liabilities. Investors, serious investors, already factor ESG risk. Ignore it, and we won't just lose goodwill. We'll lose market share. He advanced the slide again. On screen appeared a letter from CalPERS, one of Harbor Light's largest institutional investors. The words were unambiguous. We evaluate ESG risk as material to long-term performance. Harbor Light's current policies expose significant reputational risk. We support corrective action. The room shifted. Even those skeptical of Oliver could not dismiss the weight of CalPERS. A director cleared her throat. Mr. Sloan, institutional capital doesn't make threats lightly. If they see this as material risk, doesn't that change your analysis? Patrick stiffened, lips pressed thin. They don't sit in our operations, I do. Rebecca leaned in, her voice cool. But they sit on your balance sheet. Ignore them and you'll find your math irrelevant. The vote loomed like a cliff. Oliver knew he had one chance to anchor it. He stepped closer to the screen, lowering his voice so the words carried not as rhetoric, but as conviction. This is not about giving favors. This is about building a system where people like Lauren Brooks are not discarded because they have children, where Mia doesn't have to pretend to eat in a park. Our competitors can copy our buildings, our ADR models, our loyalty programs, but they cannot copy trust once it is lost. Tonight, you decide whether Harbor Light will be the company that measured success only by spreadsheets or by the people who make our rooms worth staying in. The silence stretched. Then the ballots were distributed. Pens scratched across paper, each mark carrying the weight of millions. Oliver forced himself to remain still, though every nerve felt stretched taut. Rebecca collected the votes, counted, then looked up. By majority decision, the Harbor Light ESG Impact Plan is approved. Oliver's shoulders eased, though no smile crossed his face. This was not triumph. It was responsibility. Across the table, Patrick slammed his folder shut, his eyes cold. You've weakened this company, Oliver. You'll see the consequences soon enough. Oliver met his gaze evenly. No, Patrick, we've just given it a future. Outside, the rain hammered Ballard's streets, street lamps casting blurred halos on wet pavement. Oliver stepped into the storm without raising his umbrella, the drops soaking his hair and coat. For the first time in months, the rain didn't feel like a burden. It felt like absolution. He whispered to himself, unheard by anyone but the storm. For Mia. For Lauren. For every worker who deserves more than a code. The fight ahead would be brutal. Sloan would not go quietly. But tonight, Oliver had won the vote that mattered. And somewhere in a classroom across town, a little girl was drawing branches full of books, waiting to see if the grown-ups could make her dream real. The waters of Green Lake reflected the dim halo of street lamps, their light stretching in ripples as if the lake itself carried restless thoughts. Oliver Hayes sat on a bench, hands clasped, suit jacket undone. It was late, the paths nearly empty, just the occasional jogger cutting through the fog. Tonight, he wasn't the CEO of Harbor Light. He was simply a man hoping someone would come. Footsteps crunched on damp gravel. Lauren Brooks appeared, coat pulled close against the chill, her expression wary but composed. Beside her, Mia skipped lightly, swinging a dolphin-shaped flashlight, the beam cutting playful arcs across the mist. Lauren stopped a few feet away. So, what's this about? She asked, her voice even. Oliver rose, nervous in a way he hadn't been in years. Thank you for meeting me. I wanted to talk. Not as CEO and former employee, but as two people trying to figure out what comes next. Lauren crossed her arms. Talk then. He took a breath. I should have told you the truth from the start. I hid behind a title that wasn't mine because I was afraid you'd see me only as the man who signed away your security. I see now that hiding only made it worse. I can't erase what happened, but I want to tell you what I've done since. He handed her a folder. Lauren hesitated, then opened it. The header read, Probationary Rehire Offer, Housekeeping Supervisor Track. Beneath were clear terms, 30-day review, back pay credit, no exceptions outside policy. A transparent process, nothing tied to Oliver's influence. Lauren read silently, the mist dampening the pages in her hands. Finally, she looked up. Why this? Why me? Oliver met her eyes. Because you earned it. 6 years of excellence. Because the company should never have discarded you. And because I won't build special favors, I'll build systems that give every worker what they deserve. This is the first step. Lauren sat down slowly on the bench, the folder balanced on her knees. Her voice softened, though it still carried steel. I can't forget what it was like, Oliver. Nights in the car, Mia shivering, the humiliation. You can't expect me to just move past that because there's a new policy. I don't expect that, he said quietly. But I hope we can move forward, even if the past still casts a shadow. Mia bounded over, shining her flashlight on their faces. You two look like statues, she said with a laugh. Why so serious? The tension cracked slightly, both adults managing a small smile. Lauren smoothed her daughter's hair, then looked back at Oliver. I'll accept this offer, but make no mistake. I'm not doing it because you handed me the chance. I'm doing it because I refuse to let Harbor Light or you define me as a victim. I'll walk back in those doors on my own 2 feet. Relief washed through Oliver, though he masked it with a respectful nod. That's exactly how it should be. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fog curl over the water. For the first time, the quiet didn't feel like a wall between them. After a few minutes, Oliver spoke again, his tone almost tentative. Lauren, there's something else I need to say. Forgiveness. It doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to build forward despite remembering. I don't ask for it tonight, but maybe someday. Lauren exhaled, eyes on the lake. We'll see. Trust doesn't come in speeches. It comes in what you do tomorrow, and the day after that. Mia climbed onto the bench between them, resting her head sleepily on her mother's shoulder while clutching Oliver's hand with her small fingers. The gesture startled him, a warmth blooming that no boardroom victory had ever given. For a moment, the three of them sat together under the mist, bound not by titles or policies, but by the fragile beginnings of something human. And as the ripples carried the lamplight across Green Lake, Oliver understood. The path ahead would be long, marked by suspicion and slow steps. But for the first time, forgiveness was not an impossibility. It was a horizon. The lawn at Seattle Center stretched wide beneath the silver tower of the Space Needle. On weekends, the park was alive with families, food trucks, and buskers strumming guitars by the fountain. That morning, Oliver Hayes carried a folded blanket under one arm, a simple basket in the other. He looked almost ordinary, the weight of boardrooms left behind for a day. Lauren and Mia were already waiting by the fountain. Lauren wore a light jacket, her posture easier than before, though still cautious. Mia bounced on her heels, clutching the sketch pad she carried everywhere now. Finally! Mia grinned when Oliver approached. I thought you got lost. Oliver smiled. I wouldn't miss this for the world. They spread the blanket on the grass with the Space Needle towering above, its spire slicing the sky. The basket held sandwiches wrapped neatly, apples polished bright, and a thermos of cocoa. No ceremony, no grand gestures, just enough for 3 people to share. Mia sat cross-legged, unwrapping her sandwich like a gift. See? A real picnic, not pretend. Oliver sat beside her, loosening his tie as though shedding the last armor of his title. Lauren poured cocoa into paper cups. The steam curled between them, fragrant and warm against the cool breeze. For the first time, there was no tension pressing at every silence. Conversation came slowly but naturally. Mia chattered about school. Lauren spoke of her first week back at Harbor Light, supervising a team with steady pride. Oliver listened more than he spoke. That alone felt like progress. A few hours earlier, Harbor Light had announced the official launch of its Bridge Fund and Recall First policy. Press outlets carried the story across Seattle. The company was restoring dignity to its workforce, with union oversight and housing support. Patrick Sloan had resigned under investigation, his departure buried in cautious phrasing but understood by all. Oliver knew investors would argue, analysts would doubt, and competitors would scoff. But none of that mattered here. What mattered was Mia's smile as she drank cocoa, her lips rimmed with chocolate, her laughter carried in the wind. After they ate, Mia pulled out her sketch pad. "Want to see what I drew today?" she asked eagerly. Lauren nodded. Oliver leaned closer. On the page was a colorful scene, a picnic blanket beneath a tall tower labeled carefully, Space Needle. 3 stick figures sat together, smiling, one taller with a tie, one with long hair, and one small with pigtails. Around them were children from her class, sitting under trees with open books, a lunch table nearby. In the background, a little house with smoke curling from its chimney anchored the horizon. "It's everything together," Mia explained proudly. "The house, the library tree, and us. Because a picnic isn't fun unless you share it." Oliver felt his chest tighten. The drawing was simple, almost childlike, but it was the most complete vision of belonging he had ever seen. A home, a school, a family, woven into one dream. Lauren brushed Mia's hair from her face, her voice soft. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." Oliver swallowed hard, then spoke. "Mia, one day you'll hang this drawing somewhere safe, and we'll remember today as the day things truly began." Mia tilted her head. "Began what?" "Began building something real. No pretending." The afternoon light shifted golden, casting long shadows from the Space Needle across the lawn. Children ran through the fountain, shrieking in delight. A street musician played soft chords on an old guitar, the melody drifting toward them like a benediction. For the first time in years, Oliver felt still. Not the false stillness of a boardroom after a hard-fought vote, but the kind that comes when a weight is finally lifted. Lauren caught him watching Mia as she scribbled in her sketchpad, and for a moment their eyes held. Not with suspicion this time, but with something closer to possibility. "I don't know what the future looks like," Lauren said quietly, "but today feels different." Oliver nodded. "Different is a start." Mia looked up from her drawing, grinning. "Next time, can we have dessert too?" They all laughed, the sound unguarded, warm. The next week, a photo of Mia's drawing surfaced online, snapped by her teacher, who had hung it in the classroom. Beneath the caption, "A student's dream of family and community," it spread quickly, but this time, Oliver didn't fear the attention. He welcomed it. Because Harbor Light's transformation was no longer just his fight. It was a story others wanted to carry forward. As the sun dipped behind the Olympic Mountains, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet, Oliver lay back on the blanket, staring up at the Space Needle's silhouette. He thought of the first night in Occidental Park, of a child lifting an invisible fork. He thought of the scrap of paper and shaky pencil. "I'm tired of pretending." And now here they were, sharing a picnic that was real. The empire of numbers he had once served felt distant, almost hollow. What remained was this: a mother regaining her dignity, a daughter discovering her future, and a man learning that the greatest return on investment was measured not in margins, but in lives restored. Forgiveness would still take time. Trust would still be earned in days and years ahead. But under the shadow of the Space Needle, laughter and hope finally filled the space where silence had once been. And for Oliver Hayes, that was enough. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey, from empty plates in a rainy park to a true picnic beneath the Space Needle. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us share more stories of hope, healing, and second chances.